In this video, we're going to learn how to create user-based levels of detail inside of Autodesk Inventor. With the working file Create User Level of Detail IAM open, I have my completed work cell in front of us. Our goal here is to create a level of detail that reduces the overall footprint of memory on my machine, as well as to create a better visualization for documentation or to make it easier for someone to consume our data downstream. The way you create a custom level of detail is actually quite easy, and you might have done this on your own by mistake many times before without even knowing it, and you just wondered what this level of detail thing was. Whenever you right-click on a component and you choose the option called Suppress, that unloads it from memory and creates a new level of detail 1. As an example, I'm going to turn off this factory worker here, so when I right-click and choose Suppress, what will happen is it will get crossed out in my browser on the left-hand side. It unloads it from memory. And if I make my browser a little bit wider here, you can see it tried to create a new level of detail 1. Now, what is level of detail 1? It's essentially a placeholder that's waiting for you to save the file and give it a more unique name than just level of detail 1. Sometimes you suppress something and you changed your mind, you don't want to create a level of detail. You can easily get back to that by double-clicking on Master, and that clears off that issue of having level of detail 1 behind your assembly name or trying to force a save with a new level of detail. Now, what if you really do want to have the workers turned off, or maybe the posts inside of this thing turned off, maybe some of the components or the parts that are going down the conveyor line, we want to turn them off? You can create your own level of detail as well by right-clicking on Level of Detail in your Representations folder and choosing the option called New Level of Detail. This will also give you Level of Detail 1, however, it automatically populates it into the list, and you can also rename this with a soft double-click. So I'll call this Workers Off. With the Workers Off Level of Detail active, I'm going to find the workers I don't want to have turned on, namely these iMic assemblies. I'll just hold down Shift and grab multiple ones here. Do a little rotation to make sure I got them all. Right-click on one of them and choose Suppress. So now the workers are turned off. If I go back to Master and double-click, it's going to ask me to save what I currently did to that Workers Off Level of Detail representation. I'm going to choose Yes to make that save, and it's going to go back to Master and turn them back on. And I can go back to Workers Off whenever I want to by just double-clicking on it. As you can see, they didn't save. What you really need to do is save before you go back over to that master. This is something that I wanted to point out to you, because if you don't do it right and you spend 15 or 20 minutes trying to suppress items, you might run into a little bit of frustration because it didn't save properly. So let's grab our iMics again, suppress them, and then save. You'll get a prompt to calculate the mask properties for the master level of detail. You can say yes or no to this. It basically will adjust how your mask properties are being calculated in your iProperties. I'm simply going to choose yes for this and update the save locations. Now when I go back to master and double click, the workers are turned back on. If I go to workers off by double clicking on it, they're then unloaded from memory and reducing my file size. Now, obviously, turning those 4 workers off doesn't really reduce my amount of footprint very well at all. Perhaps I just want to have the workers turned off in a view representation. Well, you can actually work back and forth between view representations and level of detail. For instance, if I expand my view rep, I can see I have master and default in my view representations. If I right-click on this, I can have the workers off be duplicated into a view representation. However, in the view representation, they are simply turned off for visibility. So even if I go back to the master level of detail, if I go to the workers off representation, the workers are turned off, but they are still loaded in memory. Now, if you've done the same thing with view representations, so let's say I create a new view rep here, and under view 1, I'm going to call this one customer part off. Inside of this, I'll find all the instances of the customer's part on the conveyor line. So just make sure I select all of them and then turn off their visibility with a right click. I can right click on the customer part off and copy this to a level of detail. So you can see how that goes back and forth. Now, if I activate the customer part off level of detail, not only are their workers still turned off, but also the customer parts. And if I scroll down, you can see they've been suppressed inside this design. Now, since we are dealing with a large quantity of components and parts, it would be very beneficial for you to understand your component selection methods available to you inside of Autodesk Inventor. Definitely remember that we have a selection filter on the top of our screen up here. If we were to click on that pull-down arrow in the quick access toolbar up there, we can see many different types of ways to select components. Now, some of these options down below only work at the current level of the assembly that you're in. For instance, if I want to select all occurrences of a yellow post that I have in here, I actually have to do this at that level of the design. So I'd have to open up my entire fencing perimeter and do that work inside of that. What I do here only takes place for selection at this top level. So this has been a look at how to create custom levels of detail inside of Autodesk Inventor's assembly environment.